There is a certain kind of person who is very strange. They walk into a room and almost instantly feel that something is off. No one is raising their voice. There's no drama, but their brain has already finished scanning everything. An avoided glance, a forced smile, a sentence that sounds normal but is full of hidden fake energy. Many people think this kind of observation is a superpower, a wonderful gift, but the truth is, this sharp awareness is actually a psychological trap. The problem is that their brain has no off switch. They can't just enjoy the moment. They take it home, pick it apart, analyze it, and replay it in their head again and again. They are the kind of person who can turn one small silence into an entire universe of thoughts. But if you know someone like this, or if you are someone like this, you already know it isn't easy. Because hyper-awareness is not just an intelligence issue. It's about constantly seeing the hidden layers of meaning that other people walk right past without noticing. It can feel like a gift, but it is also a cruel burden that slowly drains all of your emotional energy. Today we are going to decode the psychology of people who are over-aware, and how they can avoid being swallowed by their own mind. First, we have to dig into the origin of this sharp awareness. Why do some people become overly aware? Empirical psychology usually divides this phenomenon into two main groups. For the first group, this sensitivity is simply inborn. Science calls them highly sensitive persons, HSP. People who carry the trait known as sensory processing sensitivity, SPS. Their nervous system, from the moment they are born, is like an ultra-fine filter that automatically absorbs and feels everything more intensely than usual. For them, the world always appears in extremely high resolution. However, for the second group, over-awareness is not something they were born with. It is an inheritance of survival. Neuroscience calls this state hypervigilance. It often takes root in an emotionally unstable environment in the past, most commonly during childhood. Imagine a child growing up in a house where the mood of the adults changes like the weather. That child cannot live innocently. They have to learn how to become a radar station. They might have been the kind of child who memorized the sound of car tires rolling into the garage, just to know whether their father was coming home drunk or sober. They learned to hear the sound of a kitchen cabinet slamming and measure how angry their mother was. They knew exactly when to step into the living room and smile, and when to disappear quietly into the corner. Biologically speaking, their amygdala, the brain's danger alarm center, has been constantly activated. It records a message. This environment is not safe. I have to keep scanning to avoid danger. No one taught them this. Their nervous system automatically built a network of neurons to help them predict emotional disasters before they happen. And over time, that survival vigilance transforms into awareness. That awareness grows so deep that it becomes part of their identity. When they become adults, they often look back and blame themselves. Why do I always overthink? Something must be wrong with me. But no, they are not broken. They are simply carrying a kind of intelligence that was shaped by survival. The shield that once protected them has now fused into their skin. So when that shield, that massive awareness, enters adult life, how does it actually show up? Let's move to sign 1, living in constant analysis mode. This is the clearest sign and also the one that consumes the most energy. For a typical person, a conversation is just a conversation. But for them, the mind is always running a hidden equation. Take a real example. Their boss sends a message on Slack at 4 p.m. Come see me for a minute later. For other people, that's simply a meeting. But for them, the moment they read the message, a wave of tension immediately appears. They sense something unusual in the wording, a kind of invisible coldness. They feel the atmosphere of the sender and instantly begin questioning themselves. Is my boss upset? Did I mess something up? They don't just hear words, they notice the 3-second pause before someone compliments the shirt they're wearing. They catch a very slight change in the other person's breathing. Part of this phenomenon is related to the activity of the default mode network, DMN, the brain system involved in reflection and self-referential thinking. In most people, the DMN becomes active mainly during daydreaming or rest. But in people who are overly aware, this network tends to be more active, which makes the mind slip into constant analysis and interpretation. half of them is nodding, smiling, holding a cup of coffee, and participating in life. But the other half is taking notes, comparing details, and analyzing everything. The result is that their mind rarely gets any real rest. They can feel exhausted even after spending the whole day sitting in an office, because their brain has just finished running a hidden marathon. That analysis does not only point outward, it turns the camera inward, creating sign 2, hyper self-awareness. In psychology, metacognition is the ability to think about your own thinking. It is controlled by the prefrontal cortex. Everyone has this ability, but for them, it is a switch that never turns off. They do not just feel an emotion, they monitor it. The familiar chain reaction often looks like this. An emotion appears, followed by analyze it, and then judge it. They are walking outside and suddenly feel sad. Instead of simply letting themselves feel sad, they immediately cross their arms and start judging themselves. Why am I sad? Does this sadness even make sense? I should feel grateful because I have a good job, so why do I feel empty? I'm terrible for feeling this way. Even joy gets dissected. They are at a dinner party and just laughed at a joke, but the very next second, part of their mind is floating near the ceiling, looking down and evaluating, did I laugh too loudly? That might have sounded a little fake. It is just like dancing while constantly staring at your reflection in a mirror to fix your posture. They may not miss a single step, but they lose the sense of flow. Their depth of awareness increases, but their natural presence slowly disappears. When that analytical camera runs for too long, they move into sign 3, losing innocence in relationships. Deep awareness makes them start to see the backstage of human behavior. Psychology calls this strong inference about other people's intentions, related to the ability known as theory of mind. They realize that people do not always say exactly what they think. They see a coworker bring them a coffee and praise the project they just completed. Instead of simply enjoying the compliment, their brain immediately scans possible motives. What favor does this person want? Are they hoping I'll share customer data with them? They realize that kindness sometimes comes with conditions. Affection can sometimes be a calculated investment. And the confidence of a man on a date might simply be a curtain hiding his fear of rejection. This creates a quiet kind of loss. It is not the loss of childhood innocence, but the loss of relational innocence. The ability to fully trust the surface of words is no longer there. As a result, a compliment always seems to carry layers. An apology never feels complete because they suspect the other person is apologizing just to calm the situation, not because they truly accept fault. A promise sounds fragile. They do not become bitter or hateful toward the world. They simply become extremely cautious. And sometimes they feel lonely, even in a crowd, because no one else seems to see the layer of truth they are seeing. And that layer of truth is not just logical reasoning. It sinks into their feelings, leading to sign 4, empathy that is always switched on. For them, empathy is not a skill they choose to use when a friend is crying. It is a state that cannot be turned off. They walk into a meeting room. No one says a word, but they can feel the weight of irritation between two coworkers. Their mind works like a sheet of absorbent paper. Psychology calls this ability cognitive empathy. But for people who are overly aware, it does not stop at understanding with the mind. It crosses into emotional empathy, where they actually absorb and live inside another person's pain as if it were their own. This phenomenon is closely connected to neural systems that process empathy, especially mirror neurons. When they see someone expressing emotion, these neurons in their brain activate as if they themselves are experiencing that same emotion. But for an overly aware person, it becomes absorption. Someone sitting next to them on the bus taps their foot with nervous energy, and suddenly their own heart starts beating faster. A friend talks about their divorce, and after they go home, that pain sits in their chest for 3 days. What is the result? They become the emotional regulator for everyone around them. They know how to soften their voice and choose careful words to calm the atmosphere. People like being around them because they feel understood. But the price is exhaustion. They become a container for other people's emotional waste. And at the end of the day, very few people realize that the one who always understands others also needs someone to understand them. Those suppressed emotions do not disappear. They move straight into the body. Sign 5. When awareness becomes tied to the body and anxiety. Awareness does not exist only in the mind. Science calls this concept interoception, the ability to sense the internal state of the body, processed by the insular cortex. People who are overly aware often have an extremely sensitive interoception system. They drink a cup of espresso, their heart beats a little faster because of the caffeine. For most people, that simply feels like alertness. But for their nervous system, the brain detects the faster heartbeat, flips through its data records, and shouts, "Fast heartbeat equals danger. We're about to have a panic attack." Normal physical sensations become exaggerated warning signals. This creates a brutal anxiety loop. A physical sensation appears. Then, the brain misinterprets it as danger. Then, the body activates a stress response and releases hormones like cortisol, which leads to even stronger physical sensations. The result is that their body becomes a constant stream of emergency data. They feel restless and uneasy all the time, even when nothing truly bad is happening. When signals from the body and emotions become overwhelming, the mind starts searching for one final escape to restore order. That is when awareness quietly transforms from a lens of observation into a strategy of control. This is not control over others in a forceful way. It is a subtle inner defense mechanism. They operate based on an unspoken belief. If they can predict every possible variable, they will not be surprised by pain. For them, understanding becomes a kind of armor. They believe that seeing the landing point of disappointment ahead of time will prevent them from collapsing when it finally arrives. Their mind begins running simulations non-stop, quietly and endlessly in the background. They ask themselves, what if that person suddenly pulls away? What if everything they are working so hard to build disappears tomorrow? If the worst situation really happens, how should they react so they do not fall apart? This leads to a state called analysis paralysis. They get trapped inside a maze of assumptions, living in 10 different versions of the future while dissecting every possible risk, even when the present moment has not fully happened yet. This constant vigilance keeps them from ever fully belonging to the present. The cruelest result of this protective strategy is the trade-off it creates. In trying to stay ahead of pain, they slowly step outside their own life. Instead of participating in the flow of life with all its uncertainty and beauty, they begin managing life like a high-risk project. Protection replaces presence, leaving them exhausted from constantly guarding against the ghosts of the future. So what can overly aware people do? They cannot simply turn off their awareness. It is like asking someone with perfect vision to try to see everything as blurry. The solution is not to become less aware. The solution is to stop carrying everything. In psychotherapy, this usually involves setting emotional boundaries and adjusting patterns of thinking. They need to learn how to notice things but refuse to absorb them. People who manage to move beyond this burden often anchor themselves in 3 freeing principles. First, not every silence is a hidden message. If someone replies slowly to a text, sometimes they are simply exhausted. If a coworker walks past without smiling, maybe they just have a headache. They learn not to personalize everything. Second, not every emotion that appears needs an action to solve it. Anxiety may show up. Instead of rushing to analyze why, they simply say, "Oh, my heart is beating fast. It's just a physical sensation." They observe it without judgment and let it pass. Third, not every insight needs to be spoken or acted on. They may see someone's insecurity clearly, but they do not have to become that person's therapist. They may notice instability in a relationship, and sometimes the best response is simply to step back. They begin to realize that clarity is only a gift when it comes with boundaries, knowing what belongs to them to handle and what belongs to the world to leave alone. When they practice this kind of letting go, something remarkable begins to happen. Their awareness does not disappear. It softens. It matures. They still see deeply into human nature, but they no longer cling to the flaws of others. They can still feel the energy of a room very strongly, but they are no longer pulled into its current. The shift happens inside them. They move from using awareness to predict to using it to be present. They move from fear to curiosity. Instead of analyzing whether someone's smile is fake, they simply enjoy a sunny afternoon and a good cup of coffee. Their life finally becomes lighter, not because the outside world becomes simpler or because people suddenly become less complicated. The world is still full of contradictions. Life becomes lighter because they stop trying to carry every equation of the world on their shoulders at the same time. They cannot turn off the ceiling light in their mind, but they can change its intensity. They can turn it from a sharp laser that exposes every flaw into a warm candle. A candle bright enough to understand human fragility, yet gentle enough to warm themselves as well. These are the people who think deeply, the people who feel deeply. If you ever look at them and notice their quietness, understand that it is not indifference. It is a beautiful form of wisdom, a wisdom that has learned to understand life instead of being imprisoned by it. If this feels familiar, if you see yourself somewhere in the world of overly aware people, leave a comment about the sign that fits you the most. And remember, you are not alone on this journey. The depth you carry is not a flaw. It is a gift that is waiting for your understanding and compassion. If this video helped you feel a little lighter and gave you a new way to see yourself, please press like and share it with a friend. Someone who may also be tired of the noise from a mind that never truly rests. Your understanding today might be exactly the comfort they need. Thank you for watching until this moment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any upcoming videos. Goodbye, and see you next time.